Hello and welcome to the Love It
Or hate it.
podcast. And today we are reading and discussing Immanuel Kant's Perpetual Peace, specifically the six articles.
Yes. And this was originally published in 1795, so not too terribly long ago, maybe a couple lifetimes ago. And Kant is awesome. So
If you
it'll be
like
fun.
philosophy, please subscribe to our channel. Click that notification bell so you never miss a podcast. And we will dive in.
And don't say you can't. I know that's so cheesy, but it still works. Anyway,
All right, so would you
all
like
right.
to read the first article?
I definitely will. All right. So this is the first article from Immanuel Kant's Perpetual Peace. No peace treaty is valid if it was made with mental reservations that could lead to a future war. What you think?
I love it. And it actually reminds me of the parable of the broken window. That was an 1850 essay. What is seen and what is not seen? It sort of illustrates the concept of opportunity cost and the hidden consequences of economic actions. What do you think?
I'm familiar with that one. I think maybe a modern day example of that is if I see I've been guilty of this. If I have like a flyer on my windshield when I come out from being inside of a business, I'll throw it on the right in the parking lot. And I always say, well, if they're okay with people sticking stuff in my windows, I'm okay with throwing stuff on the ground. Somebody's getting paid to pick that up anyway. But in reality, there's a cost to that because they may be getting paid, but somebody else is getting billed for doing it.
Right.
So it's the exact same thing about the glazer, the window glazer guy.
Yeah, it
So
sort of reminds me also of that quote, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
yeah, yeah, that's
Like
perfect.
somebody
Yeah.
always pays, you know.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean that's I think that's peace treaties throughout history. They're always written with something. There's always some caveats in there. You can always see there's other the treaty that they're trying to sign right now for Hamas and Israel. I didn't realize that they're not giving all the hostages and militants that they've captured. That one's captured militants, the other one has hostages. They're not giving them all back. They're only giving some of them back. So that's a treaty with caveats. That
yeah.
doesn't. That's not a treaty. You know what I mean?
No.
That's just a small stoppage, like Kant's talking about.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of treaties in history have had caveats and secret clauses, right? Which
Mhm.
basically means, okay, this is like a temporary illusion of peace, when in reality, it's going to set the stage for future conflicts. So that's not really a treaty. It's like an illusion of a treaty,
Mhm.
but it's all secretive, right? There's all
Uh,
these like secret clauses that
there's a
it's almost like the fine print that
there's another one. It's there's a book called Crown and Scepter by Tracy Borman that I'm
Mhm.
reading right now, and she does the history of kings and queens all the way from the Norman, or excuse me, William the Conquerors. But anyway, in that they have when they're at war, it wasn't too terribly uncommon to say, oh well, let's have a treaty, and by the way, you can have my daughter. And the whole point is that the daughter's now going to have kids. That kid is going to have a son, hopefully. And then they're going to take that son and make that son king over there or here. And then if it comes king here, it'll be easier to seize your kingdom. So there's like a caveat in there. That's some long game business, but it's the same thing. There's a
Yeah.
reservation in there somewhere. I
Yeah.
know, I know, I know.
It's a
But hey,
hidden motive. Like every treaty seems like it has some sort of hidden motive. So that's why I love this idea. I feel like transparency in politics would be really nice. If
wouldn't
everyone
be,
was
would
just
be.
transparent, we wouldn't have all the problems and misunderstandings we have. But
Mhm.
there's always somebody with like a political agenda and hidden motives, and it's just transparency. I don't know if that's realistic, but ideally it would be nice.
Apparently not. Apparently it's not. But that's the thing I do love about Kant. I can't say this enough is that his stuff is relevant even today. That's several lifetimes ago when he wrote this, but you you don't see even a political leaning in that. It's not like Machiavelli's Prince. You don't because he wrote that. essentially directed at a certain type of class status. But this quote can go with anything. It could go with an argument that you and I might have over dinner. You know what I mean? That it's very easy to, you know what I mean? That's a very easy thing. It works. It's not based on a class structure, a certain party, a certain country, a certain political position. That's a neutral position that any government could take. That's what makes it awesome.
Any
Yeah.
government could take it, but
Won't.
will they take it?
But they won't. They won't. Nobody listens to Kant. Anyway.
All
All
right,
right.
so I will go ahead and read the second article from Immanuel Kant's
Please.
Perpetual Peace. No independent state shall be acquired by another through force.
Sure. Okay. Let me see.
I mean,
So,
I love this. I mean, I
mhm,
think that it's basically pointing out that we should respect each other's sovereignty and not take control over another state through conquest or coercion or anything like
mhm,
that. Kind of respecting everyone's own
mhm.
government. So I feel like if everyone was on board with this, we would definitely have peace.
Sure.
But there's always territorial disputes and power struggles. It's like it feels inevitable. So again, I don't know how realistic this is, but I do like the idea. What do you think?
Sure. It reminds me, there's articles for the UN with sovereignty. And I don't have to actually read the sovereignty laws, but that's one of the things that I guess Russia and Ukraine are having issues with now is people believe that Russia is dissolving the borders of Ukraine and they're losing their, Ukraine is ipso facto losing their sovereignty. The same thing with Israel essentially extending their borders because the borders are not the ones that Henry Balfour wrote with that pen. And then, gosh, I'm trying to think. There's one other great example. Kuwait and Iraq. Saddam Hussein quite literally dissolved the borders of Kuwait and essentially just poured in there. And he violated sovereignty laws again. So we see this happening in history now and before. I think Kant was onto something again. He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Would you like to read the next one?
Let's see. That is number three. I got you. Let's see. Love this one. Immanuel Kant's Perpetual Peace. This is the third article. Standing armies are eventually to be abolished. What do you think about that?
Uh, I love it. I mean, I feel like if permanent military forces were phased out, it would reduce the likelihood of war. Um, because without standing armies, countries might rely on diplomacy instead of the military to resolve disputes. Um, is it realistic? Again, I don't really know. It kind of reminds me of the Gulf of Tolkien, that incident, I think it was August 1964, when the US claimed there were two attacks on naval ships by the North Vietnamese, when in reality, they just did the one attack. And they finally admitted they just did the one attack. But what do you think?
Well, I'm certainly aware of that. And yeah, they were playing close to North Vietnam, and essentially set up the war. I think the one of our wars with Mexico was the same way. We had a soldier that essentially rode past the border on horseback and got shot, and so we decided we'd start a battle over that. And pretty much well, damn near every battle we had with the Native Americans, because technically we were invading soil. I mean, doesn't mean that they weren't invading or hadn't invaded to gain their land at one point prior to it, but still, we were an invading army. So, I mean, we would purposely move onto their territories, block their streams and whatnot. This is a way of predicating a war. So, yeah, and in the United States, our military, to my knowledge, is bigger than the next 10 militaries combined. That's that's enough. So,
Yeah,
that's big enough. I don't think you need many more standing of an army. And the rub that Kant talks about is that when you have that large of a budget invested, or just a budget invested in general into a military, at some point you have to do something with it. You have to You have to go out and fight a battle, otherwise you look foolish. And you see countries that will constantly do that. And the Romans, one thing they learned when they kept those standing armies is one, it'll bankrupt you, and two, when you're fighting against a lesser foe, they learn from that. They
Hmm.
learn because they get up close and they get to see a new type of battle, and they'll come back even harder later. So you're just creating a monster. It's beautiful, and nobody listens to Kant again.
Yeah, I feel like countries are unlikely to give up their armed forces because then they would feel defenseless. But if everyone did that,
Hmm.
then we wouldn't feel defenseless because we wouldn't. I mean, what is there to defend if no one has an army?
Oh, there's that horrible Superman movie. I think it's Superman 3, The Quest for Peace, where he tries to
Mhm.
get the UN to give up all the nuclear weapons and he takes them all and throws them into the sun. It's a pretty awful movie, but it's a pretty neat idea.
Have you seen the film Doctor Strangelove,
No, no, but I
1964?
saw you guys did a review on that on your movie.
Well, yeah, so that's sort of a parody of the arms race. And
Okay.
it's pointing out, well, to me, I feel like it's pointing out the ridiculousness of fighting for peace is like having sex for celibacy, you know? Um, it's ironic and contradictory and just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I
So,
like um shoot. I was trying to think of the so Howard Zinn, I think in the People's History, he comes across a little very socialist toward the end of the book, but he makes the point that maybe our military should be an aid-giving thing, and that when we descend on a country, that we just send a plethora of doctors and nurses and whatnot, and they go and we just descend on it in that way, and that if anybody attacked you at that point, the world would support you because you didn't come there for any misgivings. You came
right.
there to essentially heal people.
Help.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, help. And that's the Napoleon Bonaparte. That's one of his famous quotes is he's on the battlefield and the battle's over and he's touring and he sees one of the fallen foe and he orders his ambulance for that foe and one of his generals says, what's going on? Why would you do that? And he says, we're all men on the battlefield after the war. So it's with that same respect, Napoleon even kind of understood that. But I like Zen's idea. Why can't our army be like the Peace Corps?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we just got rid of our arm, all of our weapons and like the whole
Hmm.
arms race and just became the Peace Corps,
Yeah.
the
I mean, you
world would
can.
be a very, very different place.
Yeah. I mean, I can come out if somebody's injured on my lawn. I can come out and render aid. I don't have to have a gun shoved in my belt. I can still have a gun back home. I can have
Hmm.
it in the drawer in the house. There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't have to bring it to every meeting. And
Yeah.
that's essentially what we do is we bring all the big guns to every meeting. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. Which one are we on?
So we just did three. So would you like to read four?
Yeah, I can read four.
Hmm.
All right. This is from Immanuel Kant's Perpetual Peace, Article 4. National debts are to be incurred as an aid to the conduct of foreign policy. Or, no, excuse me, national debts are not to be incurred as an aid to the conduct of foreign policy.
Yes. So I love this. I think the concept of debt is just ludicrous, especially from an economic standpoint, because back in the day, our economy was backed by gold, right? Our money, our paper money was backed by gold. And now it's not really backed by anything real. It's backed by debt. And debt is this elusive thing. So I feel like if nations avoided borrowing money to fund wars, that would lead to long-term stability as opposed to this instability and exploitation that we're dealing with. This also reminds me of the Treaty of Versailles. What do you think?
I totally agree. And Treaty of Versailles is a great example because that's probably how one of the reasons why Hitler came to power is that after the First World War, us and all the other allies got together and sacked them with debt and made them pay reparations, so to speak. And then Hitler went to election, and I just actually learned this the other day. It was the Nazi Party, the Socialist or excuse me, the Nazi Party, the Communist Party, and the Social Democrats. Those were the three parties that were running for office because Heidenberg, he didn't even make it through the primaries. That was the president at the time. He had mental issues, and he didn't make it through the primaries. So the election was kind of an open election, so to speak. So you had communists, which were essentially the communists, the Nazis, and the Social Democrats. And the communists were funding that, was being funded from Russia by Stalin. And he forbade the communists from ganging up and joining with the Social Democrats because he didn't want to be paired with them. So that's why the Nazis won, because had they done that, Hitler would have lost by millions of votes. But because the vote got split three ways, and he just happened to get enough votes on his third. His third was a touch bigger. But if the communists would have teamed up with the Social Democrats, which they ended up doing later when we fought the war, Hitler would not have won. He would have lost by, I think, 2.7 million votes. But the same thing. So Hitler came to power because one of the things that he kept saying was, look how poor we are. We're destitute. All the other countries are picking on us. He's not justified. Hitler's not justified in doing anything, but that's how he rallied people together. Is that we put that country in squalor and ran it to nothing, making it pay for the war. And it's just a debt that it's like a burr in the saddle. You're not going to get anywhere. That country can't rise above. It'd been better if we sent diplomacy instead of bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, and I mean, it's easy to take advantage of people when they're desperate. Uh,
Mhm.
so I feel like
And-
that's kind of what he did.
yeah, and a lot of people that debt affected everyone in the country, and not
Hmm.
everyone in that country was pro-war. There was a majority of the population didn't care to be ruled by a despot. They were fighting back too. I mean, you know the movie Scarface?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? At the
Yes.
beginning, they say that Cuba is sending all their criminals and whatnot into the country, into our country, and that's how Al Pacino's character arrives. Is
Hmm.
because Castro is sending all the criminals, just like certain people have claimed that we're getting all the criminals from the South right now. But in reality, if you're coming from a despotically ruled country or a country that's ruled by fascism, and you're considered a criminal, you may not be a criminal here.
Right.
So somebody that Castro called a criminal back in that time period, I don't know. I don't know that necessarily means they're a criminal in the United States. Maybe they just don't like being ruled by Castro. I don't know. I don't like it either. I wouldn't like it either. Same thing with people South America. There's a drug lord that rules your country through financial means and you want to escape and take just what you can carry on your back and run across a border, you're not necessarily the same type of criminal I'm thinking. I'm thinking a criminal is somebody that's stealing from me, not somebody that's just trying to stay alive. I don't
Yeah.
know. That sounds
Yeah,
like an
I mean,
asylum.
that's a good point. There's so many different types of criminals, and I feel like that sort of brings up the whole border issue.
That's what I'm
You know,
talking about. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Some of
like
that.
a lot of people feel like, oh, criminals are coming over. But if you think about their environment and what their government is like, and they're in such a dire, desperate situation,
Hmm.
um, I don't know. I feel like I have compassion. I have more
Hmm.
compassion for them, especially if they're coming over here with the intention of having a fresh start. Now, if they're
Yes.
coming over here with the intention of just like stealing from everyone, right? Then
Hmm.
not so much. But if they're coming over here to try to have a fresh start and to adapt to a new government, then I definitely have more compassion. But I mean, you can't read their minds. So,
We have, of course, in this country, we have innocent until proven guilty.
yeah.
So, and just like the people who might hate Trump, as an example, they think that Trump is a despotic leader. Let's say you escape the United States because you feel like Trump is being despotic or leaning into you, and you escape to Europe. Can Europe now call you a criminal because Trump doesn't like you? That doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? It's those people are the tired, huddled masses that the Statue of Liberty is holding a holding a torch up, guiding to your country. And our country is founded on people who were escaping persecution. Now, it'd be better if they went through the port of entry. That'd be better. But if somebody does come up and they're dirty and hungry, or they're a child, or they're just broken, and they come and ask for, if anything, you can feed them, give them care, and then figure out what to do. But to just call them a criminal ipso facto, that's nasty. That's not a nice thing.
So do you feel that everyone that crosses the border deserves a fresh start, no
I
matter
would
what their history is?
I'm not a huge fan of the border in general, but I guess if you, according to the rules and the laws of this country, you're not going through the port of entry, so you're breaking a law. But you are also allowed to claim asylum. That's the law. If you're in any other country where we have an embassy and you're being hunted, something bad's happening to you, you've lost your wallet, you've been attacked, whatever, you are allowed to walk into our American asylum, American embassy, pardon me, and probably the same thing. And you are allowed to say, I'm an American, I'm claiming asylum. And they have to take you. And they have to
Yes.
keep you and find out if you're an American. And they'll go through it and keep you. That's so if
I
that's one of our
understand like
laws.
that's the
Yeah.
law, but I'm asking you, like, do you think that everyone who crosses the border should have a fresh start?
I couldn't do them as a whole like that. I
Yeah.
couldn't do them as a whole. I do think that somebody that is willing to take a chance and put everything they own on their back and come, they obviously something's wrong where they're coming from. That's
Hmm.
obvious. And if you show up here and you've got a willingness to work, and you've got skills, a skill set, or your skill set is just that you want to work. Um, we have jobs. There are jobs here. Dave Chappelle does that comedy routine where he says, "You guys are acting like somebody wants to pick strawberries." Like nobody. There's lots of jobs that people say, well, they're taking jobs from us, but do you want that job? Because there's people that are coming across and they're asking to do any. In the mornings when I go to work, I see people standing in front of at the QT, the gas station, and they're waiting for work. And work people will come by and pick them up. And in the morning at about 7 a.m., their day may be worth $200, but by noon, their day's worth 50. Meaning you can
Hmm.
walk up, somebody could walk up and offer them $50 and they would work because they're working for anything. And I think that type of ethic, that type of quality of human being, somebody that's willing to put forth that type of effort, that needs to be honored.
Right.
Um,
So I guess
yeah,
my question so you're
can't
sort
say
of
all.
saying you can't generalize everyone who crosses the border.
No,
You think
no, by no
everyone should
means.
be treated on a case by case basis. So I guess my question is what do you think like a good method for that would be? Because how do you tell the difference? Like when someone crosses the border, I mean, unless you have access to all their history, how do you tell the difference between
Philadelphia.
somebody
Yeah,
with like good intentions and somebody who is so corrupted that they think the way to live is to murder, steal, rape, you know. How do
sure.
you tell the
I
difference?
well, so I don't. Of course, we know the countries they're coming from. We can't necessarily trust the governance and the way that they've been labeled. So we don't know. We don't know. If their record, so to speak, if their rap sheet is true or not. But I would probably liken it to my home. If somebody comes and knocks on my door and I don't know them, and they say I'm hungry, I'm a huddled mass, or what I mean, I'm a teeming mass, or whatever you want to call it. Just I need help. I would help them. I hope I would. I would try to help them as much as I could. You can't help somebody more than you can take away from yourself because at some point you would lose the ability to help yourself. Therefore, you can't help them. So, but if somebody comes and meaning if there's 1,000 people at my door, I can't handle that. I'm trying to liken this to the country. But if somebody knocks on my door, I would welcome them in. I would try to, if I could, and if I could handle it. I mean, you may not want to do it. Uh, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily let two big dudes in either. You know what I mean? But try to do it something that I can manage because my responsibility in my home, to further the example, is that I need to be a good host, and they're my guest, and they'll be my guest as long as they act like my guest, and I'll be their host as long as they let me. And that's so. In other words, like there's some people come in and they might try to steal from me. That's not a good guest, and they're not letting me be a good host. So it's time to leave.
But how
But
would
if
you
they
know what their intentions are, is my point. So how do
you
we
try to be a good host,
hmm
that's the best I can put it. With on a country scale, it's bigger, but I can only do it with my home. In the United States, we have laws in place that say that like I said, when people come and they ask for help, we're supposed to help them. It doesn't mean you necessarily hand them all the paperwork and say you can stay. Just like I wouldn't necessarily let one of these people live in my house, but I
hmm
might help them for a while. And at some point, you might say, "Hey, it's time for you to get off the couch. You got to go." Kind of thing. But if they went out and they got a job and they started, making money and they're being prosperous, probably be a matter of time I'd be borrowing money from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe the same thing would happen. The same thing. Maybe that's what the United States should have. It's just a line of couches down by the border. And after about a couple of weeks, you come over and you tap the couch and you go, "Look, you've been sleeping on this too long. It's time to go." You
Yeah.
know. But if you get up off the couch, if you got ethics and work ethic, which I think probably a lot of people do, people that are willing to risk everything like that, then they won't be on that couch long.
Hmm.
They won't be on there long at all. I don't know. I don't know. It's a hard issue. I
Yeah,
still
it
think we
is a
should treat
complicated issue.
still got to treat everybody like humans, though. Everybody needs to be treated like humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, all right,
What do we
well, let's
What do
move
we have on
on.
there? That
So
was a
I'm
long
going
one.
to read the fifth article of Immanuel Kant's Perpetual Peace. No state shall interfere in the internal affairs of another.
All right.
So what do you
I
think?
like it. I like it. So it's uh, it's it's interesting because it seems like it's bringing there's the Teller Amendment, which is when Cuba was trying to come away from Spain and get their sovereignty. The United States essentially showed up to the debate table and didn't bring Cuba with them. They just went on their own and argued for Cuba's sovereignty. And then we essentially railroaded that country right after that for a good bit. We turned it into a giant casino. Um, Prostitution, aplenty, and drugs. All of our criminals were just going there. It wasn't a good idea. So we were essentially doing the thing to Cuba that everybody says that they were doing to us. We were doing it on a grander scale, on a more mafia related scale. So I don't know. It makes sense. And again, Kant is amazing because I think that that's true. I think it's right that we shouldn't be doing that. That makes good sense. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like in an ideal utopia world, respecting national sovereignty would prevent a lot of conflict, but it's just not the real world that we live in. So, I mean, we're all so interconnected, and powerful countries often interfere with other affairs, claiming it's for humanitarianism or strategic reasons. Like when we were helping uh, Ukraine, right? We claimed it was for like humanitarian reasons, but it's often more than just that, right? So, yeah, I love the idea of respecting sovereignty and not interfering, but I just don't know if it's realistic in 2025. But in theory, it's great.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess to correct your tense, we didn't claim. We're still funding the Ukraine.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if the new administration's going to or not, or I don't know how that's going to work out. I never understood. I I'll play dumb for a second. I don't necessarily understand the funding of a war because they'll say that the Zelensky fellow will show up at the White House, so to speak. I'm being a little figurative, and he gets money. And he goes, so does he go home with a check, a big suitcase full of money? Because we're talking about billions of dollars. So that's not something you just carry out in your wallet. That's a fat wallet. Like that's not even a suitcase. That's like duffel bags worth of money. And then where is the money spent? Is
Right.
it Did you go to the arms store on the way home? I mean, you stop.
Yeah.
No, I mean, totally serious. But in reality, it's probably that we're giving munitions and weapons to him.
Hmm.
So if we are Okay, so if we're not just giving him a big bag of money and he runs off to the gun store and buys them, and then I guess he runs back out on the battlefield and he's throwing guns to people like a John Wick movie. Here's a magazine, or that's probably not happening. If
Yeah.
he's just if he's just getting weapons from us, then when we're selling him weapons, essentially, because that means that we'd be giving weapons to him, right? We're not selling, we're giving them. Are we giving them to him and charging the taxpayer what the weapon is worth or what its costs? You know what I mean? Like we have
Yeah.
this big room full of AR-14s or 15s or whatever that stupid thing's called. And we're going to now we're going to give them to him and I have to pay for it. Do I pay cost or do I pay what the markup is on the rifle? That's
Right.
a fair question, right? If we're selling him arms and we're giving him arms, sorry, I keep saying sell. If we're giving him planes, do we pay what the plane's worth now, or what we think it's worth? I don't, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of
Yeah,
questions for that. You
it's
ever
a
heard those
good
answers?
question, and there's no way to really know what they're doing. Uh,
Probably isn't. It probably
they're
should
not
be.
really transparent with the general public about their budget and their expenses and what funding a war even really means, so we don't know.
Does he get a receipt? Do we get a receipt when we give him the money? Do we get, does he send us a Christmas card?
Right.
Like, hey, thinking about you. And plus, if you, so another one is they give him, like, they'll say that the president gave him, was like $75 billion. Do you remember one of the
Mhm.
numbers? Do you remember how much one of the numbers was?
No.
Um, let's see. Hold on. How much has, here we go. It actually auto-populated on Google. It knew where I was headed. Um, so it says that we've given 65.9 billion in military assistance. Okay, or 65.2. I see that from February 22nd. 69.2, pardon me. $69 billion. Okay,
Mhm.
my question is, why is it rounded out like that? I mean, does that, like, when you're fighting a war and you know that you need so many bullets, you need so many guns, you need so many missiles and tanks. I mean, you already have tanks. You already have the planes. You just need gas and stuff for those. And but I'm saying that, and I show up and I say, hey, I need money, and you say, well, how much? You go, well, wouldn't you think the number would be like down to the penny if we're doing exact figures, or did he just round off a number and go, you know what, I'd like 60 billion. How about 60? Because
Right.
I don't feel like we're getting any change back. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Why is it rounded off like that? 69.2 billion, so that's 69 billion, 200 million. What the
Yeah.
hell is he? What did you buy? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I do, and I do want to ask this. There's this real famous story. I looked so hard trying to find where it came from. I thought it came from Herodotus or maybe Machiavelli, or maybe it's just some obscure thing I read when I was a kid. But there's this story about a military leader, and he's got to go up against this army, and he's going to lose. He knows he's going to lose, right? So he goes and meets with the general or the leader of that army, and he says, "Hey, we know you're going to sack me, but you're going to lose so much money and so many lives in this battle. So
Mhm.
how much would it cost for us to just go away?" And he essentially got bought off. He left with a sack of money, and his kingdom, so to speak, thought he was a great leader for that because he saved all his people's lives
Could he
and he
just
got
sell
money
out?
in exchange.
Yeah.
So, so in saying that, I preface that, I say that for a preface to ask this question. $69.2 billion. Dollars. We're up to that now. Let's just call it 70 billion. Let's round up. $70 billion. Do you think he could have just went to Putin and just said, hey, how about $35 billion? And you just go away. I'll give you
Yeah.
$35 billion to not
Yeah.
bother me
How
anymore
much would
for
it
until,
cost to
yeah,
just
my
end
term
this?
my term is up in 4 years. I'll give you $35 billion. What could you buy with it? Could you buy North Korea? I mean, what, but I don't know. And then he could give us back some change. We could get 35
Well,
billion
yeah.
dollars. Yeah,
I often question like who the billionaires actually are in this world and what they actually do with their money, if anything, if it just sits there useless,
it
right?
fits there.
And I mean, to your point, I feel like I don't know. Does everyone have a price? Like, would you be able to just like bribe like Putin? Like, would Trump be able to just be like, hey, if I just pay you like 35 billion dollars or whatever, can you just leave us alone? I mean, I don't know. I don't understand it because at that point, if you're a billionaire, does any more money even matter to you? Because you're a billionaire. So it's not like
It's
you
about
need any
power at
more
that point,
money.
right?
It's
It's
not a,
power.
I feel like once you reach a certain level of economic success, money becomes irrelevant. So I just feel like the issues are so much more complicated.
Okay, I'll disagree with you in this way. Dragons sleep on their gold, right? Now,
What?
the reason I say dragons sleep
Dragons? You
on,
believe in dragons?
no, not at all. But in fictitious stories, dragons always sleep on top of their gold.
In
And the reason I
fictitious
say that is,
stories.
well, the reason I say that, oh, when I was a kid, we did AD&D like crazy. But the reason I say that is because when you are that rich, money is very important, and that's why you have to hunt power. Because think about it, it's like you and me. Like everything you have, you could go to the bank and take it out right now, and you can hold it in your hand probably, or put it in a box. Their money is so
I don't know
big
about
that you
that.
no, you know what I mean. Like, okay, well, no, but I'm saying that if you're a
You don't know how
multi-billionaire,
much money I have now.
I don't know if you have billions, but if you have billions of dollars, is my point. You can't just carry that around with you. You need to secure that money. That's a lot of money. So you need more power. So that's why the people, when they get that rich, I think they start hunting power because they're afraid that they're gonna have to sleep on that gold. They're tired of sleeping on the gold, so they gotta get out of that cave so they get power so they can surround that money and
Yeah, but
protect
I
it.
also feel like at some point, once you're a billionaire and you know how to manage your money, no one can like bribe you with money because you already have a lot of money. So why would I just say, okay, yeah, just pay me more money, more than I can handle, more than I can even do with? I feel like at that point, not everyone has a price. Not everyone can be sold.
Maybe, I don't know. I feel like money means a lot to them at that point because it's not so much now the acquisition of more of it as much as it is the fear of loss of any of it.
Hmm.
Um, because there's also a power status to that. If you're the richest person in the world, for instance, now that's the thing. You could technically be broke and nobody knows it. But the fact that you have that title alone would afford you almost anything in the world without ever writing a single check.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's like the Trump character. He said that when he was a kid, there was that argument that if his dad gave him a bunch of money or didn't give him any money, and that's always been that argument. Who cares? Your name's
Hmm.
Trump, so you can walk into the bank and just say, "My name's Trump," and they'll give you whatever you want, just because your name is your credit at that point.
Yeah.
That's
But I just
it's yeah.
I wonder if like if you feel strongly about certain principles, um, like for instance, as an example, like for me, $20 isn't much, right? So
Mhm.
$35 billion to a billionaire is like $20 to me.
$20 isn't much. I think $20 is a lot.
Like if somebody was like, "Hey, I'll pay you $20 if you kind of violate this principle of yours." I'd be like, no, my principles are more important to me
I
than
need more
20 bucks.
money. Is that
I
what you
don't
said?
need 20 bucks.
Now
You know
you
what I'm
pay me
saying?
40 off the table.
So I just feel like if you take that as like a microcosm of a macrocosm, then I don't think billionaires can be bought off. That's just my opinion, but
I get you. I get you. I think that they're covetous of money. So at that point, it's like I said, it's a power thing, and it's just. But what's interesting is that the Musk character, I guess we're a little tangential, but the Musk character, he's advertised as being the richest person in the world, but I don't believe that's true. There's a despot in North Korea that owns North Korea, right and proper, and owns everybody in it. That's why he's a despot. What's that country and everybody in it and everything in it worth? That's a lot. It's worth a
yeah.
lot. Even the leverage of the nuclear arms that he has is worth a lot. So is that worth more than Musk? Or there's people in the Middle East, most of which he borrowed the money from to buy Twitter. The people in the Middle East that have buildings that are considered artifacts made of solid gold.
Hmm.
They're priceless things. Like you could melt it down and it'd be worth this much in gold, but the shape it's in of gold is priceless.
Yeah.
What's priceless worth?
Yeah, well,
You know what I
that
mean?
gets into like a
Yeah.
different sort of philosophy about what is valuable,
Hmm.
right? Like, for instance, if I'm drinking water, I can feel the instant value of that because you feel good when you're hydrated. You can think clearly, you have energy, your digestion works well. Like, you can feel that instant value, right?
Hmm.
But when it comes to like monetary value, how do you place a value on something like you're talking about, right? So I
Hmm.
don't know. It gets a little complicated. But how about we move on to number six?
Are we on number six?
Yeah, so
Let's
you can
see.
read this one.
All right. Let's see. This is Immanuel Kant's Perpetual Peace, Article
Hmm.
number six. No state during a war is to permit acts of hostility that would make mutual confidence impossible after the war is over, e.g., the use of assassins and poisoners, breach of capitulation, incitement to treason in the opposing state. What do you think?
I love the idea. I think if somehow we could make agreements like this, it could reduce unnecessary suffering and pave the way for peace. Uh, I don't know if that's likely, right? I mean, there's so many examples of when the US violates this. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, My Lai massacre, Agent Orange in Vietnam, the torture and abuse in the Iraq War, the drone strikes in the civilian areas, post 2001, the forced displacement of indigenous people in the 19th century. So, I mean, war crimes that the US have committed. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I just don't, in theory, like, yes, I would love to apply this philosophy and it would definitely create a peaceful existence. I just don't see it happening.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. When I was a kid, I remember the Iraq War when it kicked off. It was like desert. It wasn't Desert Storm at first. It was Desert Watch or Desert Push. They always had all these soft names before they got into the tough names, or it was Desert Storm. Anyway, but I remember they showed this thing on the news where they were talking about how great our technology was in the war, and that's why we were going to be so much more advantaged than them. And they said that we could shoot a missile from a battleship in the ocean, and we could put it in the window of a truck in their area. And they were talking about that was why we were so much more superior. And then right after that, George Bush Jr. for 2 days bombed Baghdad, which is their New York, with 2-ton bombs for 2 days straight. And so, just to give an idea of how that works, if you have a grenade, it weighs 3 pounds. The ones that blow up, there's smoke ones and everything. This is the one that hurts people, throw stuff. It has a 3 meter spread. So, 3 meters, what is that, 9 feet in any direction. If you're within that area, it will shred you. Then that's a 3 pound grenade. These are 2-ton bombs.
Yeah.
That's indiscriminate bombing. You can hit a truck window from a battleship, but now you're dropping drums of 2-ton explosives on a major city. That's why would anybody want to do a treaty with you after that? That's how you
Yeah.
start. That's how you started a war. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
you're trying to fight fire with fire. You're claiming like I'm fighting for peace. Just like I said before, fighting for peace is like having sex for celibacy. It's hypocritical.
I feel
So
like it'd be better if you said like fighting for peace is like masturbating for celibacy.
well,
No,
actually, I mean, celibacy just means like anyway.
no, I'm just saying. I think I like the quote better if you said it that way. It'd be funner. But I get you. No, but Bush called that. It was. I think that's referred to as preemptive war. He said if we don't
Mhm.
fight them over there, we'll have to fight them over here.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if that means you get to bomb a major city with 2-ton bombs for 2 days straight. I mean, couldn't you just go get like one of the bad guys and rough him up, on TV or something so everybody'd see
Right.
it? You don't have to kill everybody in the city. That's a
Yeah, I
little
mean
tough.
you're
Yeah.
saying like, okay, this giant atomic bomb is going to end World War II.
Hmm.
Really? Like you think violence is going to stop more violence? It's just a precedent for mass destruction. It undermines the
Hmm.
entire concept of global
Hmm.
peace. So, it makes no sense. It's totally
You
hypocritical.
see but you see, I mean, you see it with just men in general. I'll have to speak for men because I can speak for women. But with men in general, you see them when they're having an altercation, they're arguing. One side has to, at some point, capitulate. You have to give in. You have to back off. But what each side wants to do is they want to show so much of a strength of force that the other side goes, oh, and takes it. But the difference is that you're in a different position. So to capitulate to their standards is more. It takes you to a negative, to a regress from where you began. So you have to lose a lot of ground that way. So like if you bomb my city for 2 days straight, and I say, okay, you're right, you're right. That's a hard thing to say now because the you're right also includes you bombing my city. Before you bomb the city, I could just say, oh, you're right. We shouldn't have done that thing a minute ago. We're wrong. You're right. But after you bomb the city, that's now part of the apology. I have to apologize and admit that that's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's so
Yeah.
it's like if I punch you in the face, for you to say, if you to apologize to me, you have to accept that. You know what I'm saying? And that's a
Yeah.
really shitty thing to put on somebody. And the more you do it, the harder it is for most people don't have that. That's not even character. I don't know what that is. Most people don't have that in them. You bomb
Yeah.
my city for two days straight. I don't have much of an apology in there for you. You know what I mean? At that point, it becomes revenge.
Yeah.
But that's what
I
we're
mean,
taught. Yeah.
right. And I mean, I feel like most parties in war act unilaterally and they ignore, if there are any agreements, like temporary ceasefires or respecting prisoners of war, anything like that, I feel like most of those agreements are ignored. Um,
Well,
I,
that's
I feel like to say like, okay, in war, there has to be some agreements. Clearly, war is happening. So how can you find a set of ground rules with so much violence, right? Like, how
yes,
can you
yes.
set those ground rules and expect people to honor those ground rules when you're killing people? Like,
Well, that's one of Deb's positions. Eugene Debs. He's the gentleman who ran for president many times, and he was eventually pardoned. He ran for president from prison, Atlanta prisons, but he got put in jail one time for saying that Teddy Roosevelt had gone over and met Kaiser Wilhelm II, leader of Germany during the First World War, and Teddy Roosevelt said when he met him, it was like meeting an old brother. That they got along really well, and they're smiling and shaking hands and everything. And then he comes back, and we have to all go over and kill each other in his country. And Eugene Debs said that's not right. That they actually had the thing you're talking about, that proper conversation, but they couldn't work it out in that way. So they went left. They didn't come back and fight. They sent people to fight. So they had that very proper conversation you're talking about. Didn't want to work it out. Instead, sent me and you to go die. Um, so I don't know. So maybe we should have been able to go to that conversation. Maybe we'd have been at the table and they'd have said, "Hey, if we get up from this table, you're going to have to come back here and die." I'd be willing to give in. You know what I mean? But Debs got put in prison for saying that it was improper for a leader to meet with a despot like that and act like he was all chummy and then to come back and send all us to die.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
it's
that's not
beyond
appropriate.
ironic, you know.
Yeah,
It's
you
it's
think?
insanity.
But they're acting proper, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I guess in a way, that's almost like you're rubbing it in the people who's dying. You're rubbing it in their face.
Hmm.
Because they now they have to get a rifle and go be mad about it. And you were there face to face with the predicator of that other side. And you liked him.
Right.
Anyway, that's messed up, right?
Yeah.
Oh, but anyway,
So, kind of to summarize, I feel like in theory, I love all of Immanuel Kant's ideas regarding perpetual peace. I agree with them. They're grounded in respect, transparency, diplomacy. They offer valuable lessons, but I feel like applying them in the modern world, it's kind of unlikely, unrealistic because of power dynamics and political interests and global tensions. I feel like it's almost in some way it sounds a bit naive to believe that Immanuel Kant's vision could happen. I would
it
love it
doesn't.
to happen, but I feel like in some ways it's a bit naive because not everyone in the world cares about global peace. There are a lot of people, unfortunately, that are power hungry, that want to have power over someone else. Like, that's another thing that I never quite understood. What is the point of having power over someone else? Like, I don't think that that's necessarily fun. I don't think that's interesting. Like, I don't feel good
Dwarves on the
about
shoulders of
having
giants.
power over someone else. Like, I like feeling in control of myself and having sovereignty over my own body and my own mind, but I don't need to have power over someone else to feel good. Like,
Uh,
I don't get it,
dwar-
but not everyone's
dwarves
like
on the
that.
shoulders.
So,
Dwarves on the
yeah.
shoulders of giants.
What
Yep.
did you say?
Dwarves on the shoulders of giants. That's the term. Dwarves on the shoulders of giants. They're dwarves. That's why they have to climb up like that.
Mhm.
Oh, so are my hearing that this writing speaks to you that people are born guilty then?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question because we're the whole point of examining perpetual peace is to see.
I know. It's almost like almost forgot.
Yeah, it's to see what Kant says about are people born innocent or guilty. I feel like Kant believes that people are actually born innocent because you would
I'll
have
agree with you.
you would have to believe that in order to think that this utopia is possible. You would have to believe in the natural goodness of people. So I think Kant believes people are born innocent. Um,
This makes me want to feel like people are born innocent. I guess to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, but maybe take it a different direction. That I feel like this makes me want to feel like it makes me feel like people are born innocent because otherwise this philosophy wouldn't speak to you. You wouldn't under. It would be insulting if you were that type of despotic monster that steps on people. This would be a joke to you. But this speaks to me. I feel it.
mhm.
So I can't be the only one. Kant's quite popular. He's still
Yeah.
around. So I
Yeah.
feel like this makes me want to go the direction, like the Jesus direction, that people were. Oh no, Jesus was guilty. Uh,
Well, it
gosh.
believes in original sin, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of funny because when we read Sermon on the Mount, that seemed to suggest that people are actually born inherently flawed and sinful, guilty,
Hmm.
right? But we
Hmm.
need Jesus to save us. Whereas this seems to suggest like, no, believe that most people are born innocent because if you do, there's a way you can see the promised land. You can see that
Yeah.
peace is possible. So if you believe that peace is possible, I think you're someone who gravitates towards the idea that innocent people are born more innocent than guilty. So I think because this
Mhm.
sort of resonates with us and kind of tugs on our heartstrings a little bit, we are probably more leaning towards like, okay, maybe people are born. I would say I like to believe that most people are born innocent, but I do question if some people are just born chemically altered to be not so innocent. I don't
Monsters.
know.
I do also want to say I have never seen a snake eat an apple. Just put that out there. Anyway,
Oh,
I
okay.
have never seen that once. Anyway, so just to put that out there. Just I don't know how that applies, but it's worth mentioning. But well, we're not necessarily any closer, but we have a whole lot of fun tools in our little bag. So.
Yeah. So thank you
Mhm.
for listening. Comment below. Let us know what you think about Immanuel Kant and his vision of perpetual peace. Let us know if you think humans are born innocent or guilty. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want us to dive deeper into political philosophy, comment below.
Please.
And in the meantime, keep thinking, keep asking questions, and having like interesting conversations because it can help us live better lives.
Go Kant.
Go Cons.
Yeah,
All
don't
right.
Kant. Yeah.
Bye.